They dressed her in white, like a bride, like a sacrifice. Clara Bennett stood in the rain on the worst night of her life, watching her own step-family hand her over to a stranger for cash. They told him she was infertile, damaged goods, a woman no one would ever want. But here is what her step-family did not know. The man who just paid for her already had her real medical records in his pocket. He knew the truth before he ever knocked on their door. He was not buying a wife. He was extracting a victim from the people who destroyed her. And here is what nobody saw coming. Not the step-family, not the man, and certainly not Clara herself. Within 7 days, she was pregnant. The woman they swore could never carry a child was carrying life inside her. Proof that every word they ever said about her was a lie. But that pregnancy did not bring peace. It brought war. Because the stepsister who sold her had been planning this from the very beginning.
She did not sell Clara to get rid of her. She sold Clara to breed an heir worth $40 million. And now she was coming to take that baby by force. What happens next will shock you. It will break your heart. And by the end, it will remind you of something you may have forgotten about yourself. Stay with me until the very last word. I promise you, it will be worth it. Lesson and value statement. Before we begin, I want you to know why this story matters. This is not just entertainment. This is a story about a woman who spent years believing she was broken because the people who were supposed to love her told her she was. And the moment she stopped believing their version of who she was,
everything changed. If you have ever been made to feel small, worthless, or not enough by someone who is supposed to protect you, this story is for you. The lesson is simple, but it will hit you hard. Your value was never determined by the people who hurt you. It was always yours.
They just made you forget.
Now, family, if you are new here, welcome. This channel is your safe place for stories that go deeper than you expect. Stories that make you feel, make you think, and remind you that you are stronger than anyone ever gave you credit for. If this story touches your heart, do me a small favor. Hit that subscribe button. Turn on the notification bell. Leave me a comment telling me what part hit you the hardest. And if you know someone who needs to hear this story today, share it with them. Sometimes one story can change how someone sees themselves. You never know who needs it. Now, let us begin.
The night Clara Bennett was sold, it rained so hard the gutters on Maple Street overflowed like the whole town was weeping for her. She stood on the porch of the house she had grown up in, wearing a white dress her stepmother had picked out. The kind of dress you put on a lamb before you lead it to slaughter. Clara knew exactly what she was. She just did not know yet that the man buying her would turn out to be the only person in the world who saw her as human. But here is what nobody expected. Not her stepfamily, not the man who paid for her, and certainly not Clara herself. Within 7 days, everything they believed about her body, her worth, and her future would be proven to be the biggest lie anyone had ever told. And that lie was about to destroy every single person who told it. Now, family, before we dive into this story, I need you to do something for me. If you are listening on YouTube, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications, because what you are about to hear is going to take you on a ride you will never forget. This is a story about betrayal, about a woman who was told she was broken, about a man who saw the truth everyone else tried to bury, and about a love so fierce it shattered every lie ever spoken against her. Stay with me until the very end, because the twists in this story will leave you breathless. Now let us begin. Whitfield County, Georgia. October. The kind of evening where the sky turns the color of a bruise and the wind carries the smell of wet earth and something darker. Something like endings. Clara Bennett stood in the foyer of the colonial house on Maple Street, the house her father had built with his own hands before the cancer took him when she was 12. The house that had once smelled like her mother's lavender perfume and Sunday pot roast. Now it smelled like Diane's cigarettes and Megan's expensive hairspray and the slow rot of a family that had never really been one. Her stepmother Diane was on the phone in the kitchen, her voice low and urgent, the way it always got when money was involved, which was always. Clara could hear fragments through the thin walls. Tonight, yes, tonight. She is ready. She will cooperate. Clara's fingers trembled at her sides. The white dress clung to her body in a way that made her feel exposed, like a mannequin in a department store window. She had not chosen it. Megan had laid it out on her bed that morning with a smile that never reached her eyes and said, "Wear this? Look presentable for once I'm..." Megan, her stepsister, 31 years old, blonde hair that cost $300 a month to maintain, and a mind that worked like a steel trap designed to catch anything that might benefit her. Megan sat at the kitchen table now, filing her nails with the casual precision of a surgeon, her eyes tracking Clara, the way a cat watches a bird that does not yet know the window is open. "She is coming tonight," Diane said, hanging up the phone and turning to Clara with the expression she always wore when she was about to say something cruel and pretend it was practical. "He is coming tonight. You will smile, you will be polite, and you will not embarrass this family." Clara felt the words land like stones in her stomach. "What family?" she said quietly. "You sold the last piece of Mom's jewelry last month. What is left to embarrass?" Megan did not look up from her nails. "You," she said, her voice flat and smooth as glass. "You are what is left to embarrass." The words cut, but Clara had learned years ago not to bleed where they could see it. She had learned to swallow the pain, to fold it into the small, dark space inside her chest, where she kept everything they had taken from her: her father's memory, her mother's locket, her future, her body's own truth. Because 3 years ago, Megan had driven her to a specialist in Atlanta, a doctor in a sterile office who had looked at charts and shaken his head and told Clara the words that had defined her existence ever since: premature ovarian failure, permanent infertility, you will never have children. Clara had sat in that office chair and felt the floor disappear beneath her. Megan had held her hand. Megan had whispered, "It will be okay." Megan had driven her home in silence and then told Diane, and within a week, the word had spread through the family like poison: infertile, damaged, defective, a burden with no future value. What Clara did not know, what she would not discover for years, was that the doctor had lost his medical license 18 months later for fraud. That the diagnosis was not hers. That the documents bearing her name had been forged by the very woman who had held her hand and whispered comfort while the lie was being sealed. But tonight, standing in the foyer, in a white dress she did not choose, Claire knew only what she had been told. She was broken, she was worthless, and she was about to be sold to a stranger because broken things are cheap, and cheap things are useful to people who know how to profit from desperation. The doorbell rang at exactly 8:00. Diane smoothed her blouse. Megan set down her nail file. Clara felt her heart begin to pound so violently she was certain the sound of it filled the entire house. Diane opened the door, and the rain blew in with the man who stood on the porch. He was not what Clara expected. She had imagined someone old, soft, desperate. The kind of lonely, wealthy man who needed a wife for appearances and would accept damaged goods at a discount. That was how Megan had described the arrangement. A man who does not want children, who just needs someone presentable. You should be grateful anyone wants you at all. But the man in the doorway was none of those things. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that the rain had plastered to his forehead, and hands that were rough and calloused in a way that did not match the expensive watch on his wrist. His eyes moved across the room with the efficiency of a general surveying a battlefield, cataloging exits, threats, weaknesses. When his gaze passed over Clara, it lingered for exactly 1 second, then moved on as if she were a piece of furniture he had already accounted for. Nathan Hartwell. The name had been spoken in the house for weeks with a reverence usually reserved for saints or lottery winners. Self-made millionaire. Construction empire built from nothing. A man whose reputation in Georgia business circles was one of absolute, unyielding control. He did not smile, did not greet Clara, did not even acknowledge her beyond that single sweeping glance. He spoke only to Diane, and his voice was low and flat, the kind of voice that did not need volume to command attention. The terms were clear. She comes with me tonight. The payment transfers in the morning. Diane nodded so eagerly, her head bobbled like a toy on a dashboard. Yes, of course. Everything is in order. She is healthy. She is, well, you know her situation, but she is obedient. She will not cause problems. Nathan's expression did not change. He looked at Clara again, and this time his gaze held, not with warmth, not with pity, with something she could not identify, something that felt like assessment, but deeper, more personal, as if he were looking not at the white dress or the trembling hands, but at the thing buried underneath all of it. "Are you ready?" he said. The first words he spoke directly to her. Clara wanted to scream. She wanted to run. She wanted to tear the white dress off her body and throw it at Megan's smiling face and tell them all that she was not property, not livestock, not a line item on a transaction sheet. But her voice came out small and steady, and all she said was, "Do I have a choice?" Nathan studied her for a long moment. Then he said something that would echo in her mind for days afterward, a sentence she would turn over and over like a stone in her palm, trying to understand its weight. Everyone has a choice. Most people just do not know it yet. He turned and walked toward the black SUV parked in the driveway. Clara followed, her shoes sinking into the wet gravel, the rain soaking through the white dress until it clung to her like a second skin. She did not look back at the house. She did not look back at Diane or Megan. She climbed into the back seat of the SUV and pulled the door shut behind her. And the sound it made, that soft, definitive click, felt like the closing of a chapter she would never reopen. The car pulled away from the house on Maple Street, and Clara Bennett's old life ended in the rearview mirror, dissolving into rain and darkness and the fading porch light of a home that had never really been one. The drive lasted 40 minutes, and Nathan Hartwell did not speak for 38 of them. Clara sat pressed against the passenger door, as far from him as the back seat would allow, her arms wrapped around herself, shivering from the rain and from something deeper, something that lived in her bones and had lived there for 3 years, ever since the word infertile had been branded onto her identity like a mark of shame. The SUV moved through the Georgia night, headlights cutting through sheets of rain, past farmland and pine forests, and the occasional gas station glowing like a lonely star in the darkness. Clara watched the world blur past the window and tried to understand what was happening to her. She had been sold, actually sold, like an object, like a piece of furniture being moved from one house to another. And the man sitting 3 feet away from her, silent and still as a statue, now owned the receipt. After 38 minutes of silence, Nathan spoke without turning his head. "You can stop pretending you are not terrified. It is a waste of energy." Clara flinched. His voice was calm, matter-of-fact, like he was commenting on the weather. She opened her mouth to respond, but what came out surprised even her. "Are you not supposed to say something like, 'Do not worry, I am not a monster'?" Nathan's jaw tightened slightly, almost imperceptibly. Anyone there none who has to tell you they are not a monster probably is one. Clara had no response to that. She turned back to the window and watched the rain, and something in his words lodged itself in her mind like a splinter, not comforting, but honest. And honesty, she realized, was something she had not experienced in a very long time. The estate appeared gradually, first as a glow beyond the tree line, then as a stone wall that seemed to stretch forever along the road, and finally as a gate that opened automatically as the Ayufa approached. Clara's eyes widened despite herself. The house, if you could call it a house, rose from the Georgia landscape like something from another century. Stone and timber, 3 stories, lit from within by warm light that spilled across manicured gardens and gravel paths. "This is your house," Clara said, her voice barely above a whisper. Nathan pulled the SUV into the circular drive. "No, this is where I keep my house. My actual house is the 3 rooms I use. The rest is for tax purposes." Before Clara could decide if that was a joke, the front door opened and a woman appeared in the doorway. She was perhaps 58, with silver-streaked hair, pulled back in a practical bun, and an apron that had seen better decades. Her eyes swept over Clara with the speed and accuracy of a medical scan, taking in the soaked dress, the running mascara, the trembling shoulders. "Lord have mercy," the woman said. "You look like a cat somebody threw in a swimming pool. Get inside before you catch pneumonia and I have to explain to Mr. Hartwell why his new guest died on the first night." Clara almost laughed. Almost. The woman's name was Rose Calloway, and she had been Nathan's housekeeper for 11 years. And she was, as Clara would discover over the coming days, the closest thing to a mother that anyone in that house had. Rose led Clara upstairs to a bedroom that was larger than Clara's entire apartment at Diane's house. Fresh sheets, thick towels, a bathrobe laid out on the bed. A window that overlooked the garden, the rain streaking the glass like tears. "Take a hot shower," Rose said. "There is tea on the nightstand. And if you need anything, you pick up that phone on the desk and press 1. That rings me. Press 2. That rings Mr. Hartwell." She paused. "I would suggest pressing 1. Rose left, and Clara stood alone in the enormous room, dripping on the hardwood floor, and tried very hard not to fall apart. She showered, she drank the tea, she put on the bathrobe, and sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the wall, and waited for the fear to subside. It did not, but something else crept in alongside it, a small, tentative curiosity that she could not quite suppress. Nathan Hartwell had paid for her, but he had not looked at her the way a man looks at something he bought. He had looked at her the way you look at a puzzle you intend to solve. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. She opened on it to find Nathan standing in the hallway, still in his rain-damp clothes, holding a manila folder. "Come to my office," he said. "There is something you need to see." She followed him down a long corridor lined with bookshelves and framed photographs, none of which featured smiling faces, to a large room dominated by an oak desk that could have doubled as a dining table. He gestured to a leather chair. She sat. He slid the folder across the desk, read it. Clara opened the folder with trembling fingers, expecting the worst. A marriage contract, an ownership agreement. terms and conditions that would define her as property, legal language that would seal her fate in black and white. What she found made no sense at all. It was a freedom contract, carefully written, legally precise, and utterly unprecedented. The document stated that Clara could leave at any time, without question, without explanation, that she would receive $50,000 upon departure, regardless of circumstances, that a personal bank account in her name had already been funded, that no physical, emotional, or domestic obligations were required or expected of her, that she was, in every legal sense, free. Clara read it 3 times. Then she looked up at Nathan, her lips parting, her mind racing, unable to reconcile the document in her hands with the transaction that had brought her here. "This does not make any sense," she said. "You paid for me. Why would you let me leave?" Nathan leaned against the edge of his desk, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "Because the people who would not let you leave are the reason you are sitting in that chair." The words hit her like a wave, sudden and overwhelming. Clara set the folder down on the desk, covered her face with both hands, and cried, not dramatically, not loudly, quietly, the way you cry when the pain is so old and so deep that it does not know how to come out any other way. Nathan did not touch her, did not move closer. He pulled a box of tissues from a desk drawer, set it on the surface between them, and said, "Take your time. Rose will show you to your room when you are ready." Then he left, closed the door behind him with a soft click, and Clara sat alone in the office of a man she did not know, holding a document that promised her something she had not experienced in years. A choice. The first 3 days in Nathan Hartwell's house passed like a dream Clara kept expecting to shatter. Day 1, she explored cautiously, moving through the mansion like a visitor in a museum, afraid to touch anything, afraid to take up space. The house was enormous, but strangely empty, most rooms pristine and unused. As if Nathan lived in a small island within a vast sea of polished floors and expensive silence. She found the library first, floor-to-ceiling shelves filled with books, but not the kind she expected. Not leather-bound classics chosen for appearance. Medical journals, legal case studies, investigative reports, financial regulations. The books of a man who spent his life preparing for battles other people did not see coming. Rose appeared at precisely 7 in the morning with breakfast, refused to let Clara help with dishes, and delivered the first of what would become a daily tradition of observations that hit like velvet-wrapped hammers. "You keep apologizing for existing, sweetheart. That is not manners. That is damage." Clara opened her mouth to argue and realized she had nothing to say because Rose was right. Day 2, Nathan was mostly absent. Phone calls, meetings, the sound of his voice drifting from behind closed doors, and tones that ranged from calm to commanding to something that sounded like barely restrained fury. But Clara noticed things he had left for her. A laptop on the desk in her room. A new phone, already activated, clothes in her size, practical and comfortable, hung in the closet. Toiletries she had not asked for, arranged on the bathroom counter with a precision that suggested Nathan had instructed someone to handle it. Everything functional, nothing romantic. A note on the laptop read, "The Wi-Fi password is Rose, put it on a post-it. Do not ask." She almost smiled. Almost. Day 3 changed everything. Clara could not sleep. She had gone downstairs to the library at 11 at night and found a medical journal on reproductive endocrinology. Her nursing training, the education she had been forced to abandon when her step-family decided she was more valuable as a transaction, pulled her in like gravity. She was deep into an article on ovarian function when she heard footsteps. Nathan appeared in the doorway, bourbon in hand, tie loosened, looking like a man who had spent 12 hours fighting a war nobody could see. Interesting choice, choice, he said, nodding at the journal. I was a nursing student, Clara said. Before everything. Nathan sat down in the chair across from her. Not close, not far. A deliberate distance. For the first time, his expression softened. Not into warmth, exactly. Into recognition. Why did you stop? Hard to study when the people paying for your education decide you are more valuable as a transaction. Silence. The rain had stopped, and the only sound was the ticking of a clock somewhere deep in the house. What if that could change? Nathan said. Clara looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time. Past the expensive clothes and the controlled expression and the calloused hands, she saw something she had not expected. A crack, a thin fracture in the armor he wore, and behind it, just for a moment, something that looked like understanding. Things like that do not change. Not for people like me. Nathan held her gaze. They did for me. He did not elaborate. He finished his bourbon, stood, and left the library without another word. Clara sat alone with the medical journal, and the echo of his voice, and the unsettling realization that she wanted to know more, not about his money or his house or his reasons for buying her contract, about him, about the fracture she had glimpsed, about the story behind those 4 words that hung in the silence like a promise and a warning. Day 4 brought the thunderstorm, and with it, the moment Clara would replay in her mind 1,000 times after. The power went out at 9 in the evening. The generator kicked in within seconds, but there was a gap, a stretch of absolute darkness that lasted no more than 4 or 5 heartbeats, but was long enough for Clara's mind to travel back to Diane's house, to the bedroom with the lock on the outside, to the hours she had spent in darkness as punishment for infractions she never understood, her small fists pounding on the door, her voice raw from crying, the silence on the other side so complete it felt like the world had simply forgotten she existed. Nathan found her in the hallway, back against the wall, knees drawn up, breathing in sharp, shallow gulps. He did not ask what was wrong. He sat down beside her on the floor, his back against the same wall, his shoulder not quite touching hers, and he said nothing. Just sat there in the dim emergency lighting while the storm raged outside and Clara's breathing slowly returned to normal. After 5 minutes, Clara said, "You do not have to sit here." "I know." "Then why are you?" Silence. Then quietly, "Because nobody sat with me when I needed it. And I remember how that felt." Clara's hand reached for his in the dark. He let her take it, did not squeeze, did not pull away, just let her hold on. Day 5. Nathan told her his story, and Claire understood the fracture she had seen. They were in the kitchen. Rose had gone to bed early, leaving a pot of soup on the stove and a note that said, "Eat something, both of you. I am not running a fasting retreat." Nathan ladled soup into bowls, and Clara watched his hands, the scars across his knuckles, the way he moved with the efficiency of someone who had learned to do everything himself because there was no one else. "My father built a construction company from nothing," Nathan said, not looking at her. His partner of 15 years betrayed him, forged documents, diverted funds. By the time my father realized what had happened, the company was gone. Everything was gone. My mother left 3 months later. My father started drinking. He died when I was 19. Liver failure. Clara set down her spoon. "I am sorry," Nathan shook his head. "Do not be sorry. Be angry. Sorry does not fix anything. Anger, properly directed, builds empires." I was 19 with nothing. No money, no family, no education. I got a job cleaning septic tanks. 16 years old when I started working, 19 when I lost everything, 25 when I made my first million. Built it with my hands, Clara. Every single dollar. He looked at her then, and the fracture was wider, the thing behind it more visible. Not pain, exactly. Purpose. The kind of purpose that comes from surviving something that should have destroyed you. People think money fixes things, he said. It does not. It just changes who is trying to break you. And now I need to tell you something about the people who sold you to me. And Clara, the thing he was about to reveal, would change everything she thought she understood about her own body, her own worth, and the elaborate machinery of cruelty that her stepsister had been building for years. Nathan brought Clara to his office on the morning of day 6. His investigator, a quiet man named Paul, who looked like he had never smiled in his life and did not intend to start, was waiting with a cardboard box filled with documents. "Sit down," Nathan said, and the gravity in his voice made Clara obey without question. Paul opened the box and spread files across the desk with the methodical precision of a surgeon laying out instruments, hospital records, forensic document analysis, financial transaction logs, phone records, each file labeled, indexed, and damning. Nathan did not ease into it. He did not soften the blow with preamble or cushion it with sympathy. He told her the truth, like pulling a bandage off a wound, fast and clean, because he knew that slow revelations only prolonged the pain. "Clara, you are not infertile. You have never been infertile. The diagnosis you received 3 years ago was fabricated. The documents were forged by your stepsister Megan using a doctor named Richard Hale, who lost his medical license 18 months after your visit for falsifying patient records in 6 separate cases. Yours was one of them." Clara's hands gripped the arms of the leather chair. The room seemed to tilt, the walls shifting, the floor becoming uncertain beneath her feet. She heard the words, but could not process them because processing them meant dismantling 3 years of belief, 3 years of grief, 3 years of carrying a label that had defined her existence. Nathan continued, "Your stepmother, Diane, is cruel, but she is not the architect of what happened to you. Megan is." Megan identified the doctor. Megan forged the referral. Megan drove you to the appointment and held your hand while the lie was delivered. Megan then used the diagnosis to position you as damaged goods, reducing your perceived value so that when the time came to sell you, the price would seem reasonable and the buyer would believe he was getting a woman who could never complicate his life with children. Clara's vision blurred. She blinked and felt tears track down her cheeks, but made no move to wipe them. The anger that had been coiled inside her for years, buried beneath layers of grief and resignation, began to stir, hot and dangerous. "How long have you known?" she whispered. Nathan met her eyes without flinching. "Before I met you." The words detonated in the silence. Clara stood up so fast, the chair skidded backward on the hardwood floor. "So you did not rescue me out of kindness. You came prepared. This was a plan." "Yes." "Why? Why would you spend money, time, everything on a stranger?" Nathan's jaw tightened. The fracture in his armor widened until Clara could see straight through it, and what she saw made her knees go weak, because Megan Price did the same thing to someone I loved. My sister, Emily. 4 years ago, Megan was engaged to a man in our social circle. When Emily discovered Megan was forging financial documents, Megan destroyed her. Fake evidence of theft, rumors of instability, a harassment campaign so sophisticated Emily did not realize it was happening until she had lost her job, her reputation, and her will to live. She attempted suicide. She survived, but she has not been the same since. The room was so quiet, Clara could hear the clock ticking in the hallway. "I have been building a case against Megan Price for 3 years, Nathan said. "You are not the first person she has done this to, but I intend for you to be the last." Clara stood in the center of the room, trembling, torn between gratitude and fury. Between the relief of knowing her body was whole and the devastating realization that she had been a pawn. Again, so I am a weapon to you, she said, not a person. Nathan stepped closer. One step. His voice dropped, and when he spoke, the controlled business tone was gone, replaced by something raw and unguarded. You were a person to me the moment you cried in this office on the first night. Everything else came after. Clara stared at him, searching for deceit, for manipulation, for any sign that these words were just another layer in a plan designed to use her. She found none. She found only a man standing in front of her with his armor in pieces, telling her a truth that cost him more to speak than any amount of money. She sat back down, picked up the files, read every single page while Nathan stood by the window and watched the morning light move across the Georgia hills. When she finished, she looked up, and the woman who looked up was not the same woman who had sat down. The grief was still there, the pain was still there, but underneath it, for the first time in 3 years, Clara Bennett felt something she had forgotten she was capable of. Rage. Pure, clarifying, magnificent rage. What do we do now, she said. Nathan almost smiled. Now we make them pay. What happened between Clara and Nathan over the next days was not the fairy tale progression that stories like to pretend exists. It was messy. It was uncertain. It was two damaged people circling each other like survivors of the same war, drawn together by gravity they did not fully understand and could not entirely resist. Day 6, after the revelation, Clara did not speak to Nathan for hours. She sat in the library and read every file Paul had compiled, absorbing the scope of Megan's manipulation, the years of planning, the calculated cruelty of forging a medical diagnosis to control another human being. When she finally emerged, her eyes were red, but her voice was steady. I want to help build the case, she said. I remember things. Dates, conversations, details, Megan said. When she thought I was too broken to pay attention, I was paying attention. Nathan looked at her with an expression she had not seen before. Respect. Not the polite, surface-level kind. The kind you earn by standing up when everything inside you wants to collapse. The days that followed were consumed by preparation, legal strategy, evidence review, but they were also woven through with something else, something neither of them named because naming it would make it real, and real things could be taken away. It happened in small moments. Nathan's hand resting briefly on her shoulder as he leaned over her to point at a document. Clara bringing him coffee at midnight when she heard him still working in his office. The way their conversations drifted from legal strategy to personal history to the kind of quiet, honest exchanges that happen only when two people stop performing and start actually seeing each other. Rose, who missed nothing, observed the shift with the satisfied expression of a woman who had been waiting 11 years for exactly this. He made her breakfast, Rose told Clara one morning, shaking her head in wonder. Scrambled eggs. I did not even know that man could find the stove without a GPS. Tommy arrived on day 6, breezing through the front door with the easy charm of someone who had never met a room he could not own. Nathan's younger brother was everything Nathan was not. Loud where Nathan was quiet, warm where Nathan was guarded, quick to laugh, quicker to hug. He wrapped Clara in an embrace like they had known each other for years. So you are the mystery woman who got my brother to eat dinner at a table instead of standing over the kitchen sink like a raccoon, Tommy said, grinning. I owe you a debt I can never repay. Clara laughed. A real laugh, full and unguarded, and across the room she saw Nathan watching her with an expression that made her chest tighten. What Clara did not see, what no one saw, was Tommy stepping into the hallway 30 minutes later, phone pressed to his ear, voice low and urgent. Yes, she is here. She is not leaving. No, he is different with her. I have never seen him like this. On the other end of the line, Megan Price smiled. The night everything changed between Clara and Nathan began with a power outage and ended with a conversation in the kitchen that neither of them planned. Clara found him at the counter at 11 at night, bourbon in hand, reading something on his phone, with a jaw so tight she could see the muscles working beneath his skin. He looked up when she entered, and his eyes moved over her once, quickly and then away. Deliberately, they talked. Not about the case, not about Megan, about everything else. Movies. Whether pineapple belonged on pizza. Nathan said yes. Claire was appalled. The worst jobs they had ever worked. Nathan's septic tank summer. Claire's pet store parrot that learned her name and screamed it at every customer until she was fired for the bird harassing people. Nathan laughed. Deep, sudden, surprised, like the sound had escaped before he could catch it. Clara realized she had never heard him laugh before, and the sound did something to her that she was not prepared for. Then the air changed. Nathan reached across the counter and brushed a strand of hair from her face. His hand lingered at her temple, fingertips barely touching her skin, and Clara's breath caught in her throat. I need to tell you something, he said, about why I really brought you here. His phone rang. He looked at the screen. His expression went from open to closed in the space of a heartbeat. I have to take this. He left the kitchen. Clara stood alone with her racing pulse and the unanswered question hanging in the air like smoke. The seventh morning came with golden light and a truth that could not be contained any longer. Clara woke feeling different. Her body hummed with a sensation she could not name, something primal, something deep. Her stomach rolled with a nausea that was not illness, but transformation. She knew. Before any test, before any confirmation, she knew. Her nursing training, her knowledge of her own body, the timeline, the math. Everything pointed to a single, impossible, undeniable conclusion. Rose had placed a small box in the bathroom cabinet days ago without a word, because Rose Calloway missed nothing and prepared for everything. Clara opened it with trembling hands. 2 lines. Clear, unmistakable, positive. Clara sank to the bathroom floor. She did not cry. She held the test in both hands and stared at it. And for the first time in 3 years, the word infertile disintegrated in her mind like paper thrown into fire. She was pregnant. The woman they said was broken. The woman they sold because she was worthless. The woman who had believed for 3 years that her body had failed her. She was carrying life. Nathan found her on the bathroom floor. She held up the test. No words were necessary. He knelt beside her, and this powerful, controlled man, this empire builder, this survivor, his hands were shaking. Clara, it is real, Nathan. It is real. He pulled her against his chest and held her, and she felt his heartbeat hammering against hers, 2 rhythms sinking into one, and she realized that everything she had been told about herself, every lie, every cruelty, every stolen piece of her identity was gone, burned away by the truth growing inside her. Nathan's voice was rough against her hair. They told you that you were nothing. They lied. You are everything. And Clara, for the first time since she was 12 years old, believed it. For 2 weeks after the pregnancy confirmation, Clara lived in a state of cautious joy that felt almost dangerous. She had learned through bitter experience that happiness was fragile, that good things came with conditions, and that the moment you believed you were safe was the moment the ground opened beneath your feet. But the days kept passing, and the ground held. Dr. Susan Whitfield, Nathan's obstetrician, confirmed the pregnancy at 6 weeks. Healthy, strong, no complications. Clara sat in the examination room and heard the word healthy and felt it land in her chest like a small sun, warm and bright and real. Nathan held her hand during the appointment with a grip that was steady and sure, but Clara could feel the faint tremor running through him. This man who commanded boardrooms and negotiated million-dollar contracts was undone by the sound of a heartbeat on a monitor. Rose, back at the house, had already converted a guest room into a nursery planning headquarters. When Clara protested that it was too early, Rose waved a hand dismissively. "Sweetheart, I have been waiting 11 years for something to decorate in this house that was not another bookshelf. Let me have this." The legal case against Megan was progressing. Nathan's lawyers had compiled enough evidence to file criminal charges. The forged medical documents, the payments to the discredited doctor, Megan's financial trail leading back years, showing a pattern of fraud and manipulation that extended far beyond Clara. Everything was falling into place. Clara, working alongside Nathan's legal team, had provided detailed testimony. Dates, conversations, the exact words Megan had spoken in the car on the way to the fake specialist. The look on Megan's face when she held Clara's hand and whispered it will be okay. Every detail preserved in Clara's memory with the precision of someone who had been trained to observe and document. It was working. The case was strong. The evidence was damning. And for the first time, Clara allowed herself to think the thought she had been afraid to speak aloud. "I think I am finally safe," she told Rose one evening. Rose looked at her with an expression Clara could not quite read, something between love and worry. "You know what my mama always said," Rose murmured, folding a small yellow blanket. "The devil does not come dressed in a red cape and horns. He comes as everything you have ever wished for. Do not mistake peace for safety, sweetheart. They are not the same thing." Clara did not fully understand. She would, soon. Tommy came for dinner on a Tuesday evening. He was nervous, though he hid it well behind his usual jokes and easy charm. He complimented Rose's cooking. He teased Nathan about learning to change diapers. He asked Clara about her nursing studies, which she had resumed through an online program. After dinner, Tommy suggested a walk around the property. Just the two of them. He wanted to get to know his future sister-in-law, he said. And the words made Clara smile, because they implied a future she was only now daring to imagine. They walked the garden path in the evening light, Tommy chatting easily about his plans, his travels, his complete inability to cook anything more complex than toast. Clara laughed and felt normal for the first time in years. Then Tommy's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. His face changed. Just for a moment, just a flicker, but Clara saw it because she had spent years learning to read the micro-expressions of people who were hiding things. "Excuse me," Tommy said. "Just need to take this real quick." He stepped behind a hedge, but not far enough. The evening was quiet, and sound carried. Clara moved closer. Not suspicion, instinct. The same instinct that had kept her alive in Diane's house. The animal awareness of danger that develops in people who have been hurt too many times to ignore the signs. She heard Tommy's voice, low and urgent, and then she heard another voice. Tinny through the phone speaker, but unmistakable. "Is she showing yet? I need to know timing for the filing. Megan Price." Clara's blood turned to ice. Every cell in her body went still. The garden, the evening light, the gentle breeze, all of it shattered like glass, and she was standing in the wreckage, unable to breathe, unable to move, unable to do anything except stare at the man who had hugged her like a sister and laughed at her jokes and sat at Nathan's table, eating Rose's cooking while feeding every detail of their lives to the woman who had tried to destroy her. Tommy turned, saw her face, The phone dropped to his side. Clara, wait. It is not what you think. How long? Tommy's expression crumbled, every bit of charm, every layer of performance, falling away to reveal something small and desperate underneath. 3 months. She has everything on me, Clara. Gambling debts, photos, things that would destroy Nathan's reputation. I did not have a choice. Clara felt something snap inside her. Not the fragile thread of hope, not the tentative trust she had built. Something older, something forged in the years of darkness and locked doors and whispered insults. The part of her that had learned through pain to distinguish between people who genuinely had no choice and people who simply chose themselves. You had a choice, she said. Her voice was quiet, steady, devastating. You chose yourself. She turned and walked back to the house, not running, not crying, walking with the deliberate steps of a woman who had been betrayed so many times that the shock of it had finally worn off, leaving behind not pain but purpose. She found Nathan in his office, told him everything, watched the warmth drain from his face, replaced not by sadness, but by a rage so cold and controlled it was more frightening than any explosion. Get out of my house, Tommy. The words were spoken quietly, but they carried the weight of every sacrifice Nathan had ever made for the brother he thought he could trust. Nathan, please, she threatened to. Get out. Tommy left. The front door closed. The sound of his car starting and pulling away faded into the night, and Nathan sat in his office chair and went completely, terrifyingly still. Clara approached him, not with tears, not with comfort, with clarity. Nathan, not now, Clara, please. She left him alone, went to Rose's room, sat on the edge of Rose's bed, and said the words that marked the moment Clara Bennett stopped being a victim and started being a fighter. Rose, I need your help. Nathan will not be able to think clearly right now. So I need to think for both of us. Rose looked at her with quiet pride. Now that is the woman I knew was in there all along. Megan Price struck with the precision of a surgeon and the cruelty of someone who had spent years perfecting the art of destruction. The legal papers arrived by courier 3 days after Tommy's banishment. Clara opened the envelope at the kitchen table, rose beside her, and read the contents with a composure she did not feel. Megan had filed a countersuit. The claims were devastating in their audacity. First, that Nathan had coerced Clara into a sexual relationship while she was under psychological duress, making the pregnancy evidence not of love, but of exploitation. Second, that Clara was mentally incompetent when she signed the freedom contract, rendering it void. Third, and this was the one that made Clara's hands shake with fury, that the Bennett family demanded custody rights over the unborn child as Clara's legal guardians. She wants my baby, Clara said. The words came out raw, scraped from somewhere deep. She forged documents to say, I am infertile, and now she wants custody of the proof that she lied. But there was more. Nathan's lawyer uncovered the true motive within 48 hours, and when he explained it in Nathan's office, the room went so silent Clara could hear her own heartbeat. Nathan's late father had established a trust, a separate, locked account worth $40 million, accessible only to the first grandchild of a Hartwell heir. The trust had been dormant for years, waiting. Megan had known about it. She had known about it before she ever sold Clara to Nathan. The entire scheme, every piece of it, had been designed around that trust. Megan had chosen Clara specifically, had forged the infertility diagnosis specifically, had sold Clara to Nathan specifically. The infertility label was not meant to protect Nathan from complications. It was meant to make Clara seem safe, to lower Nathan's guard so that when Clara inevitably became pregnant, because Megan knew the diagnosis was fake, the resulting child would activate the $40 million trust. Megan's endgame was not Clara. It was the baby. Get custody through legal manipulation. Become the child's appointed guardian. Access the trust. Walk away with $40 million and leave Clara and Nathan with nothing. Clara sat in Nathan's office and felt the full horror of the realization settle over her like a shroud. She did not sell me to get rid of me, Clara said. She sold me to Nathan specifically to create an heir she could steal. The silence that followed was the kind that fills a room when the truth is so monstrous that words cannot contain it. Clara had believed she understood the scope of Megan's cruelty. She had been wrong. The manipulation was not opportunistic. It was architectural. Every element designed, tested, and executed with the cold precision of someone who viewed human beings as nothing more than variables in a financial equation. But here's the thing about Clara Bennett that Megan Price had never accounted for, had never even considered because it did not fit into her equations. Clara was not just a victim. She was a nursing student who had been trained to observe, document, and analyze. She was a woman who had survived years of abuse by paying attention to every detail, every conversation, every flicker of expression on the faces of the people who hurt her. And she was, underneath the grief and the fear and the carefully constructed helplessness, absolutely furious. Clara did not wait for Nathan to create a plan. She went to the kitchen, where Rose was pretending not to eavesdrop, and said, "I need a phone, a computer, and Paul's number." Within 2 hours, Clara had contacted Dr. Whitfield and arranged for her complete medical history to be independently verified and notarized by 3 separate medical professionals. She had called Nathan's lawyer and formally offered to testify as a witness. She had begun writing a detailed timeline of every interaction with Megan over the past 4 years. Every conversation she remembered, every document she had seen, every lie she had been told, and the precise moment she had been told it. Rose watched her work and said nothing except to bring coffee and sandwiches at regular intervals and, once, to rest a hand briefly on Clara's shoulder and squeeze. "I spent 3 years believing I was broken," Clara said without looking up from her work. "I am not spending one more day letting someone else write my story." Nathan appeared in the doorway an hour later. He looked different. The cold rage had not gone, but it had been joined by something else. He watched Clara working, documenting, building the weapon that would destroy the woman who had tried to destroy her, and the expression on his face was one Clara would remember for the rest of her life. It was awe. The night before the court hearing was supposed to represent the beginning of justice. Nathan's legal team had filed an emergency motion to dismiss Megan's suit. The judge had agreed to expedited proceedings. The evidence was overwhelming. The momentum was theirs. And then Diane Bennett appeared at the mansion gate. Security cameras picked her up at 9 in the evening, a lone figure standing in the rain. No car, no escort, just a woman in a wrinkled coat, clutching her purse with both hands, looking smaller and older than Claire remembered. Nathan's instinct was immediate and unequivocal. Remove her. But Clara stopped him, her hand on his arm, her voice quiet but firm. Wait, let me talk to her. Nathan looked at her with an expression that said everything his voice did not, that this was a mistake, that Diane could not be trusted, that compassion in this situation was a liability. Clara knew all of that. But she also knew something Nathan did not. She knew what it felt like to be controlled by Megan Price. She knew how Megan's manipulation worked, the threats, the isolation, the systematic destruction of will, and she knew that not everyone who participated in cruelty was its author. Diane sat in the kitchen, cup of tea, untouched, hands trembling, Rose stood in the corner with her arms crossed and an expression that could have curdled milk at 20 paces. "I was weak, Clara," Diane said, her voice cracking. "I was a coward. Megan threatened me after your father died. She had documents, real ones this time, things your father had signed that gave her leverage over the estate. She told me if I did not cooperate, she would take everything and leave me on the street. I was terrified. I am not asking you to forgive me. I'm asking you to believe that I never wanted this. I never wanted them to take your baby." Clara watched her stepmother and felt the old familiar war between the part of her that wanted to believe and the part that had learned, through years of bitter education, that wanting to believe was the most dangerous feeling of all. She allowed Diane to stay the night, against Nathan's judgment, against Rose's barely concealed disapproval. Claire was cautious but compassionate because she understood something about mercy that people who have never needed it often do not, that it costs nothing to offer and everything to withhold. At 3 in the morning, Rose shook Clara awake. "Get up. Now." Diane made a phone call 20 minutes ago. I listened on the kitchen extension. Clara's blood went cold. Who did she call? Rose's expression was grim. Megan. The details emerged quickly. Diane had been sent. Megan had coached her on what to say, which emotions to display, which words would penetrate Clara's defenses. And while Clara had shown mercy, Diane had been documenting photographs of Nathan's gun safe, the bourbon bottles in his study, the prescription medications in his bathroom cabinet, every image designed to build a narrative that the Hartwell home was unsafe for a child. Clara stood in the hallway in her robe and felt the betrayal settle into her bones, not with the devastating shock of the first time or the second time, with a cold, final clarity. The last ember of hope she had held for her stepmother, the tiny, persistent flame that maybe somewhere underneath it all, Diane had one decent impulse, flickered and died. She walked to Diane's guest room, opened the door. Diane was sitting on the bed, phone in hand, startled. Clara spoke clearly, without emotion, without volume, without trembling. "I hoped you had one decent bone in your body. I was wrong. Get out of this house. And tell Megan I will see her in court." Diane opened her mouth. Clara closed the door. Rose, watching through the security camera, as Diane hurried down the driveway, said quietly, "Forgiveness is a gift you give yourself, honey. But it does not mean you have to let the snake back in the garden." Nathan appeared behind Clara. He did not say, "I told you so." He did not remind her that he had warned against it. He simply put his hand on her shoulder. "You okay?" Clara turned to face him. Her eyes were dry, her jaw was set, her hands were still. "No. But I am angry enough to win. And right now, that is better than okay." Whitfield County Courthouse, 9 in the morning. The gallery was packed. Local reporters occupied the back rows with notebooks and phones. The air was thick with the particular tension that accompanies the collision of private cruelty and public scrutiny. Clara sat at the plaintiff's table with Nathan beside her and their lawyer, a precise woman named Catherine Walsh, who had the demeanor of a chess grandmaster and the courtroom presence of a general. Clara's hands were folded on the table. Her heart pounded, but her face was calm. She had practiced this calm. She had earned it. Megan Price arrived at 8:55, exactly on time, dressed in a charcoal suit that cost more than Clara's entire wardrobe at Diane's house. Her hair was perfect, her makeup was flawless, her expression was one of dignified concern, the worried stepsister fighting for her family's well-being. It was a magnificent performance, and Clara hated her for it with a clarity that felt almost liberating. Megan's lawyer presented the case with the slick confidence of someone who had been paid very well to make lies sound reasonable. Clara Bennett had been in a vulnerable psychological state. Nathan Hartwell had exploited that vulnerability. The pregnancy was evidence of coercion, not affection. The Bennett family, loving and concerned, sought only to protect the unborn child from an unstable environment. The gallery murmured. Clara felt sick. She leaned toward Nathan and whispered, "She is winning. They believe her." Nathan's eyes were fixed on Megan. "She has not faced you yet." Megan took the stand. She cried. Not the messy, honest crying of genuine emotion, but the careful, photogenic tears of someone who had practiced in a mirror. She spoke of her love for Clara, of her desperate attempts to protect her stepsister from a predatory billionaire, of sleepless nights, worrying about the baby. It was masterful. Even Clara, who knew every word was a lie, felt a momentary stab of doubt. That was how good Megan was. Then it was Clara's turn. She stood, walked to the witness stand, sat down. The courtroom seemed enormous from this angle. Every face a judgment, every pair of eyes a question. Catherine Walsh approached her and said, "Tell us your story, Clara, in your own words, from the beginning." Clara's voice shook on the first sentence. She heard it and hated it. But then she looked at Megan, sitting at the defense table, with her practiced sympathy and her expensive suit, and something inside Clara, something old and fierce and unbreakable, rose up from the place where she had kept it buried for years. She told them everything. Not the sanitized version, not the legal summary, everything. The locked bedroom at Diane's house, the meals she was denied as punishment, the stolen mail that kept her isolated from the outside world, the slow, systematic destruction of her self-worth that had been Megan's specialty, a daily erosion so subtle Clara had not recognized it as abuse until it was too late. She told them about the car ride to the specialist, how Megan had held her hand, how Megan had whispered it will be okay in a voice so gentle and warm that Clara had actually felt grateful. Grateful to the woman who was in that very moment orchestrating the destruction of her future. She told them about the diagnosis, the word infertile, spoken by a doctor who would later lose his license for doing exactly this to 6 other women. The way the world went gray after that. The way food lost its taste and sleep lost its rest, and the future became a blank wall, with nothing written on it. She told them about the night she was sold, the white dress, the rain, the casual, efficient way Diane had pushed her toward the car, like handing off a package. And then she told them the truth about Megan's plan. The words came out clear and sharp, each one placed with the precision of a surgeon. She did not sell me because she hated me. She sold me because she had already calculated exactly how much my baby would be worth. $40 million. That is what my child's life is worth to Megan Price. That is why she forged the documents. That is why she chose Nathan Hartwell specifically. That is why she is sitting in this courtroom crying tears she practiced in a mirror and pretending to care about a woman she has spent 4 years systematically trying to destroy. The courtroom was silent, not the polite silence of an attentive audience, the stunned silence of people who have just seen the mask pulled off a monster. Megan's composure cracked, just barely, a twitch at the corner of her mouth. A flicker of something in her eyes that was not sadness or concern but rage, the rage of a predator whose prey has turned around and bitten back. Catherine Walsh introduced the evidence, document by document. The forged medical records with forensic analysis confirming Megan's fingerprints on the original files. The bank transactions showing payments from Megan to the discredited doctor. Phone records, financial record, a paper trail so thorough and damning it read like an indictment before any charges had been filed. Then Tommy took the stand. He looked like a man who had not slept in weeks, which he probably had not. He was pale, visibly ashamed, his usual charm stripped away to reveal something much smaller and more honest underneath. He told the court everything: the phone calls, the information he had passed, the gambling debts Megan had used as leverage. And then he delivered the detail that no one in the courtroom was prepared for. Megan told me the plan 6 months before Claire was sold. She said, and this is exactly what she said: "The infertility thing is genius. He will think she is safe. He will sleep with her because he feels sorry for her. And when she gets pregnant, and she will, that baby is my retirement fund." She showed me the trust documents. She had known about them for over a year. Megan stood up and screamed, not words, a sound. Raw and ugly and completely at odds with the polished performance she had maintained all morning. The mask shattered, and the woman underneath was exactly what Clara had always known she was. Judge Patricia Moore's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Sit down, Ms. Price. One more outburst, and you will be held in contempt." Megan sat, but the damage was done. Every person in that courtroom had seen the real face behind the tears. Judge Moore delivered her ruling on a Thursday afternoon, with autumn light streaming through the tall windows of the courthouse and the gallery holding its collective breath. This court has reviewed extensive evidence of fraud, forgery, conspiracy, and calculated manipulation, the judge said, her voice carrying the calm authority of someone who had seen the worst of human behavior and still believed in the power of law to address it. All claims filed by the Bennett family are dismissed in their entirety. The custody petition is denied. Ms. Megan Price is hereby referred to the district attorney for criminal investigation on charges of fraud, forgery, conspiracy, and attempted custody manipulation through deception. The gallery erupted, not in cheers exactly, but in the collective exhale of people who had been holding their breath for hours. The judge was not finished. A permanent restraining order is issued against Megan Price, Diane Bennett, and all known associates. They are to have no contact with Ms. Bennett, Mr. Hartwell, or the minor child by any means, at any time, under any circumstances. Violation will result in immediate arrest. Judge Moore looked directly at Clara. Her expression softened slightly, from judicial authority to something more personal. "Ms. Bennett, this court has seen many cases of family betrayal, but the calculated cruelty demonstrated by Ms. Price represents one of the most egregious manipulations this bench has ever witnessed. You showed remarkable courage in telling your story today. You are free. Fully, completely, and permanently," Clara broke. The composure she had maintained through hours of testimony, through the evidence presentation, through Megan's screaming and Tommy's confession, all of it dissolved in a single moment. She pressed her hands to her face and sobbed, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming, almost physical sensation of a weight being lifted that she had carried so long she had forgotten what it felt like to stand straight. Nathan's arms were around her instantly, not performing, not posturing for the courtroom, holding her because she needed to be held, and because he needed to hold her, and because some truths are too big for words and can only be expressed through the simple act of one person refusing to let go of another. Rose, sitting in the second row of the gallery, was crying openly and did not care who saw. She had brought tissues. She had brought an entire box. She went through half of it. As the courtroom began to empty, as the reporters filed out and the lawyers packed their briefcases, and the ordinary machinery of justice resumed its daily rhythm, something happened that Clara did not expect. Diane approached her. Security moved to intercept, but Clara raised a hand. Wait, let her speak. Diane looked old. Not just tired, diminished, as if the past months had aged her by decades. She held a small box in her hands, the kind of box you might keep jewelry in, or letters, or the small precious things that connect you to a past you can never return to. This was your mother's, Diane said, her voice barely audible. Megan told me she sold it. She did not. I hid it. I should have given it to you years ago. I am sorry it took this long. She extended the box. Clara took it, opened it. Inside was a locket. Silver, tarnished, the clasp slightly bent from age. Clara recognized it instantly because she had spent years looking for it, years believing it was gone forever, years mourning not just the object, but what it represented. The last tangible connection to the woman who had loved her without conditions, without agenda, without cruelty. She opened the locket. Inside was a photograph. Her mother, young and smiling, holding baby Clara in her arms. And an inscription etched into the silver in letters so small you had to hold it close to read them. My brave girl. Clara closed the locket, looked at Diane, did not forgive her, did not hug her, did not pretend that a single act of decency could erase years of complicity, but she nodded once. Thank you. For this. Only for this. Diane left. She would not appear again. Clara had closed that door with the quiet finality of someone who understood the difference between mercy and foolishness. 1 month later, Clara sat on the porch of the Hartwell estate on a November evening, wrapped in a blanket Rose had crocheted herself, watching the sunset paint the Georgia hills in shades of amber and gold. Her pregnancy was showing now, a small, firm curve beneath the soft fabric of her sweater. Real, undeniable, alive. She had re-enrolled in nursing school, online courses, working at her own pace, studying in the library, where she had first begun to fall in love with the man who had brought her there. She had insisted on applying herself, using her own name, paying what she could from the account Nathan had set up for her. He had offered to cover everything. She had refused, not out of pride exactly, out of the need to know that the life she was building belonged to her. Nathan appeared at the porch door. His sleeves were rolled up, his hair was disheveled. He looked like a man who had just spent an hour arguing with a caterer on the phone, which, as it turned out, he had. "Come outside," he said. "I need to show you something." She followed him to the garden. Rose had strung lights through the trees, small white lights that glowed in the gathering dusk, like earthbound stars. The air smelled of pine and the last of the autumn roses. "Clara," Nathan said, "I had a whole speech planned. Rose helped me write it. It was very impressive." Clara smiled. "What happened to it?" "I forgot every word the second you walked outside." From the kitchen window, Rose's voice carried across the garden with the clarity of a church bell. "The speech is in your left pocket, Nathan." Nathan closed his eyes briefly. "Thank you, Rose." Clara was laughing and crying simultaneously. The tears blurred the lights into soft halos, and the laughter hurt her ribs, and she did not care. Nathan got on one knee. No courtroom audience, no legal strategy, no performance. Just a man on the damp grass of a Georgia garden, looking up at the woman who had made his world make sense. "I did not bring you here to save you," he said. "You saved yourself. I just had the good sense to stand close enough to watch it happen. Clara Bennett, I do not want to own you. I do not want to protect you. I do not want to define you. I want to stand next to you for the rest of my life and make sure nobody ever makes you forget how extraordinary you are. Will you marry me?" Clara looked at him through tears that tasted like salt and relief and the impossible sweetness of a future she had once been told did not exist for someone like her. "Yes," she said, "but only if Rose can plan the wedding." From the kitchen window, already started. "I booked the caterer last Tuesday." 6 months later, Clara graduated from her nursing program, top of her class. Nathan sat in the front row of the gymnasium with their 3-month-old daughter in his arms, Lily Rose Hartwell. Named for Clara's mother, Lily, and for the woman who had brought coffee at midnight and crocheted baby blankets and seen the truth about Clara before anyone else. Rose held the baby during the ceremony. She cried the entire time and told everyone within earshot that she was allergic to the gymnasium. That evening, back at the estate, Clara stood in the nursery doorway and watched Nathan rock Lily to sleep, his large hands cradling the tiny body with a tenderness that still surprised her, not because she doubted his capacity for it, but because she marveled at how the same hands that had built an empire could be so impossibly gentle. He looked up and saw her watching, smiled. The real smile, the one that had taken weeks to earn and months to see regularly, the one that transformed his face from commanding to human. "What?" he said. "Nothing. Just looking. At what? At the life I was told I would never have." Nathan held her gaze, and in the soft light of the nursery, with their daughter sleeping between them and Rose singing off key, somewhere in the kitchen, and the Georgia stars pressing against the windows, like witnesses to something worth remembering, Clara felt the last piece of the old pain dissolve, not disappear, not vanish as if it had never existed. Dissolve, like salt in warm water, still present in some fundamental way, still part of the composition of who she was, but no longer sharp, no longer defining, no longer the loudest voice in the room. Now, if you are listening to the story and you see yourself in it, the woman who was told she was broken, the person who believed the lies because the people telling them were supposed to love you, I need you to hear something. You are not what they said you are. You never were. The people who break you down do not do it because you are weak. They do it because your strength terrifies them. And the moment you stop believing their version of who you are, that is the moment your real life begins. It took Clara 28 years, one stranger's courage, one honest doctor, and one stubborn Southern housekeeper who had never in her life minded her own business to learn that. But she learned it. And if she can, so can you. Thank you for listening, family. If Clara's story touched your heart, tell me in the comments, what would you have done when Diane showed up at the gate that night? Would you have let her in, or would you have turned her away? I want to hear your answer. And make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because next week's story is about a woman who discovered her husband's second family at her own daughter's wedding. You do not want to miss it. Until next time, stay blessed, stay strong, and keep coming back, where every story goes deeper than you expect. See you in the next chapter. Closing statement. Thank you for staying with me until the very end, family. That tells me something about you. It tells me you are the kind of person who does not give up on a story. And I am willing to bet you do not give up on yourself either. Before you go, remember this. Clara was not saved by a man. She was not saved by money, or a courtroom, or a lucky break. She was saved the moment she decided to stop believing the lie. Everything else followed from that one decision. And now, one final note. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with real-life lessons. Every word was crafted with intention, because we believe you deserve more than just noise. You deserve stories that stay with you long after the screen goes dark. I will see you in the next chapter. stay blessed, stay strong, and never let anyone write your story for you.